Well, good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here again. My name is Peter Flint. I'm a partner at the law firm Volterra Fietta, and I'm joined here today by another of our partners, Ahmed Abdelhakam. We're going to talk to you largely about themes in international law, rather than boring you with the detail of what the various things that we're talking about actually say for themselves. Our firm is very narrowly focused in what we do. We really do one thing, which is formally what is called public international law, but it's really the law of international relations. And by that I mean that it covers two broad fields. One is concerned with boundaries, and boundaries which are both on land and maritime boundaries at sea. Why would those be interesting to the mining sector? Well, maritime boundaries are, we believe, going to become increasingly important to miners as deep sea mining develops around the world. Maritime boundaries are interesting, particularly in crowded areas of the world. And maritime boundaries, for example, in the Eastern Mediterranean, are all nestling up against each other, and there are and will be significant disputes as to precisely where the boundaries lie, already very relevant to people in the oil and gas sector. But as I say, as deep sea mining develops, as we are sure that it will, then maritime boundaries are going to be hard fought over. And it's important to be advised by people who actually know what the rules are, and there are a lot of rules, plus additional rules now relating to deep seabed mining, which is largely policed by the International Seaboard Authority, which is based in the Caribbean. The other part of our practice is about the relationship between cross-border project investors, particularly cross-border mining project investors, both those who are carrying out the mining exercise, but also those who finance those companies. Mining, as you all know better than I do, is an activity which is taking place in many poorly developed and not always stable environments. And it's important for those involved in the industry to take note of the protections and remedies which are out there for you as a matter of international law. Last year I talked about bilateral and multilateral investment treaties, which are really the bedrock of the international law system of protections available to your companies. Today, Ahmed and I would like to talk about some of the subsidiary or less well-known systems of protection which exist, and to make some comments on the shortcomings of some of them and the strengths of others. Three in particular, which we think might be of interest: the African Continental Free Trade Agreement, the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and the various agreements of the Organization of the Islamic Conference. Now, the Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement marks the success of a hugely complex and time-consuming exercise carried out by the African Union, and has now been signed up to by practically every African government. It's an interesting, wide-ranging agreement which covers customs, it covers free trade, but it also affords certain protections, limited protections, to those who are involved in cross-border projects. And of course, as I said, that includes all of you. The African Continental Free Trade Agreement has a number of shortcomings, and I think the benefits of it should not be stressed too highly. It's simply something which you need to be aware of and, to a limited extent, familiar with. As yet, it hasn't been resolved as to how this agreement is going to interact with the various regional agreements which are already in place. I mean, anyone active in Africa will be familiar with ECOWAS, SADC, and the various other regional trade partnerships which exist on the continent. The Africa Continental Free Trade Agreement does not actually provide for a system of remedies directly available to the private investors, and this is one of its great shortcomings. The dispute resolution provisions of the Free Trade Agreement only provide for disputes to be resolved between signatory states, and for various very obvious reasons, I don't think we're going to see very many of those coming up. Certainly not in the near future. The Islamic Conference Organization, I'm going to let Ahmed talk about. I mean, it's a fascinating and little appreciated piece of international law which binds together practically every Islamic state in the world. So it runs from Indonesia, oddly, all the way to Guyana. And I'm not sure why Guyana is a member of it, but it is, and should be respected as such. The really big and important, comparatively recent development in this field has been the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Rather grandly, its full title is the Contemporary and Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership. And as the name says, it is an agreement, much like a multilateral investment agreement, between most of the Pacific Rim countries, with a couple of exceptions, well, with three exceptions, notable exceptions. Two notable because of their absence, and those two are the United States and China. And one is notable for its inclusion, and that's the United Kingdom, which, to the best of my knowledge, does not have a shoreline in the Pacific. The UK joined, I think, for a number of reasons, but primarily we joined at a time when, post-Brexit, the government of the day was searching around for as many international trade deals to do as possible. Many of the obvious ones have not happened for various reasons, but the Trans-Pacific Partnership has allowed the United Kingdom to become a fully fledged member, which means that British companies or British investors have all of the protections which were afforded by that agreement, but also, of course, the vulnerability to claims being made against it by cross-border investors from other signatory countries, which, for example, leaves the British government and ultimately the British taxpayer exposed to claims by, let's just think of an example, a Singaporean investor in a UK-based mining exercise, of which there are not many, as you know, but there are one or two which are very much in the limelight at present. The mining sector have already begun to take advantage of the dispute resolution provisions in the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Two quite substantial claims have already been registered under the agreement by Canadian mining companies, and I think that we can expect quite a stream of future cases, particularly bearing in mind that Australia, for example, is a signatory to the agreement. The two Canadian cases have actually been brought against Mexico, and Mexico is a country going through a period of change and development with the new political regime coming in. It isn't really a new political regime. Mrs. Sheinbaum is really a creature of the last president, but has been very vocal in pronouncing changes which will affect primarily the banking sector, the foreign banking sector in Mexico, but also mining companies involved in that country. So what she says is something which we are studying very carefully. Before I hand over to Ahmed, one point I'd like to stress is that these international law protections, which are out there and of great value, are only available to your companies if you take the appropriate steps to make sure that you are entitled to the protections under those agreements. Often that is as straightforward as incorporating your business or your investment vehicle in a country which is a signatory to the relevant multilateral or bilateral arrangement. That has complications of its own, as you'll be aware, both in terms of taxation, regulation, and all of the other considerations that go with the choice of domicile for a company. And we spend quite a lot of our time advising cross-border project owners or investors on how to best access the international law protections which are available to you. That's all really from me. Ahmed, do you want to take over and do your bit for the Islamic conference?
Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Good Good morning, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here today to speak to you about such an important topic. And I would like to start by answer a question that may be on your minds, or at least for some of the attendees, saying, I'm a mining professional, I'm a geologist, why should I be sitting here listening to a lawyer talking to me about issues? Well, yesterday, having attended the first day of the conference, led me to reshape my speech a little bit. And I'll start with a personal anecdote. And I've looked around, and I think the nice person with whom I had an exchange yesterday is not present here today. But in any event, I'm not going to name him. But I was talking to someone, and the first question was, oh, what do you do? And I replied, I'm a lawyer. He said, oh, I'm not interested in talking to you then. And then that kicked off a very nice conversation, and he came around 180 degrees, to quote him. So put that anecdote in the back of your mind. A second anecdote was, I was speaking with a general counsel of a mining company operating a gold mine in Sudan. And they were seeking advice about how to handle the issues of the ongoing civil war, which basically was hindering their abilities to extract the gold, etc. And when we came to look into their dispute resolution options and what protections they had, it turned out that they had no legal instruments or treaty covering them or protecting them to bring a claim against the state. And what we discovered is that their license was giving the exclusive jurisdiction to an obscure arbitration center in Khartoum that was run by one individual, and they had no other remedy to go against the state in a neutral forum abroad. And when I asked the general counsel what happened, she said, well, we acquired this mine through acquisition, and we really had no interest in looking into the applicable law or dispute resolution mechanism. So you see, these are two anecdotes of I have no interest in talking to a lawyer. That's not my priority now. All I'm fixated on is lining up financing, securing permits, and getting the project kicked off, which is entirely legitimate. And the other side is, oh, we're not interested in dispute resolution issues, etc., because this is not really what our focus is. Our focus is value, creating value, running the project. So these two anecdotes are really my platform for giving you my personal experience in advising mining companies in Africa and Latin America over the past 5 years, to give you a high-level overview of really the main sources of legal risks that mining companies who have advised face. And this covers companies operating copper mines in Morocco and Zambia, diamond mines in Angola, gold mines in Sudan or South Africa, and all of this by reference to the various legal instruments on the screen. So just to cut to the chase, there are 3 or 4 main legal risks that lead to dispute. And as you may all know, the first one is what we call resource nationalism, which most often leads to a renegotiation of your contract with the government. And I will expand later on, and this happened a lot in, for example, Democratic Republic of Congo, Indonesia, South Africa. And then you have geopolitics, that's the second factor. So what I mean by geopolitics is civil unrest, civil wars, wars of aggression, occupation, as we've seen in Sudan, for example, in Ukraine, which really impact your ability to exploit your mine and extract the profits that you've worked hard and injected a lot of cash to operate. And the third main legal risk, which is new relatively, is state-sponsored third-party intervention. And we've seen a couple of these examples in DRC, Zambia, and Djibouti. But Djibouti was not related to a mine company, but it gives you a flavor, and most recently Liberia in relation to mining. So, and the fourth main source of legal risk really is a constant change of goalposts when it comes to environmental obligations. So these are really the things that always consistently come up. And when they come up, it's already too late for you. When you face these issues as a company, you must have already been setting up your legal protection mechanism, because by the time you start reading about them in the press, it's probably too late to start either restructuring your investment or starting to find a way to protect it. So I'll start with the resource nationalism. So what does it mean in practice? What it means in practice is you're the CEO of a mining company, you wake up in the morning. Actually, another anecdote yesterday, a CEO of a mining company was telling me, we're operating in this country, it's a very stable country, nothing ever happens. Well, nothing ever happens until something happens, right? So you wake up in the morning and see that politician with whom you've had excellent relationship, because of a skyrocketing in the price of the mineral, he started accusing you in the press for political reasons, maybe upcoming elections or something else, saying, oh, your mining company is not paying enough taxes, should be paying more. Or your company is shamelessly polluting the environment, we should withdraw their environmental permits. As you've seen in Panama, for example, the various judicial decisions which... So these are practical examples, right? And then there are two outcomes. Either the government tells you, okay, we need to sit down and renegotiate your contract to less favorable terms, which can impact your profitability, or can lead to the withdrawal or termination of your concession. So you've spent 10 years or 5 years lining up financing, prospecting, developing, constructing your mine, and all of a sudden, nothing. So what do? Again, these treaties that were listed, such as the Organization of the Islamic Conference Treaty or the various BIT, bilateral investment treaties that are in place, offer you these protections. That's why it's important to structure your investment at the time you're going in, at the time of final investment decision, so that you have that safety net. And that's resource nationalism. So you've got to be careful about this. Going back to the Sudan example, the client was telling me, we never thought that would be a civil unrest in Sudan. Sudan has been stable for 40 years. Nothing ever happened. Almost half a century was a stable country. We had good relationship with the government. Overnight, it's gone. So, and again, Niger, Burkina Faso, what's happening now, I mean, for a year now, which has impacted the entire supply chain and ability to import equipment, sanctions imposed regionally, these have real impact on your investments, right? So that's resource nationalism, and you've got to be very careful about it. And at the same time, what I say to governments when they come to me is, mining companies do not mind paying taxes or complying with the environmental obligations that you said. What they really don't like is two things, is uncertainty, constant moving of the goalposts, and they don't like that the effect of you exercising your sovereign powers, you effectively take out their investment. I mean, if your profitability as a result of these measures decreases by 95%, there's no investment anymore. What's the point? So, again, this is really a hot topic. And that's why it's important to keep in mind the cyclical changes in price, because when price skyrocket and elections are looming, should be prepared for something like that to happen. Now, moving to the second risk, which is geopolitics. And I've briefly touched upon it when dealing with resource nationalism, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, but I would like to mention something that's increasingly coming up over the last 10 to 15 years that we didn't really used to witness before, is not really wars of aggression, which end up in occupying territories, etc. No, it's internal civil unrest. So a fraction of the government or of the military who's basically looking to seize power, and without really a clear victory, which end up in a division of the country into two parts. So I'm going to give you a couple of examples. So you've got, for example, Sudan, which is divided into two. You've got Libya, you've got two governments in effect. You've got Yemen. So, and what really this issue is this issue raises a couple of legal complications. What if your concession is in a territory that is controlled by the rebels or by a government that is not the internationally recognized government? What's the legal status of the contracts or the concessions that you conclude with these people? That's one question. A second question, what if the legitimate government grants concessions over your same area because it doesn't recognize your legal contract or instrument with the rebels? How do you deal with this? And it has massive implications. To what extent can you repatriate funds abroad in hard currency? So all these are very practical questions, which bilateral investment treaty or regional investment instruments really give you the best protection. And I'll come to that later. Now, moving to and this is my favorite topic for a reason, because it's really on the rise now, and we're starting to witness it. So state-sponsored third-party intervention. And I'm not going to name states because it's irrelevant. Any state can be the source of this. And as you all see, now there is a real competition, especially when it comes to critical minerals. Countries across the globe are racing really to secure strategic partnerships with states with huge deposits. But what I would like to highlight to all of you is, assume you have a concession with a state A. And a 30-year concession, you spent 10 years injecting millions of dollars, you just started making profit and extracting, I don't know, copper, lithium, whatever. And all of a sudden, your concession is terminated, and you learn that your concession has been given to another company that belongs to a state whose host state is a geopolitical rival of your home state. What do you do? Do you turn against the state? Do you turn against the other company who got the concession? And you probably all heard about the First Quantum and ENRC issue in DRC a couple of years ago. You may have heard about most recently what happened in Liberia, where a UK company got its license terminated, and the license was given, and this is public information, and the concession was given to an Asian company. So these are very practical issues that you may potentially face in the future and will be on the rise. You've all seen, for example, that new market players are coming in, right? So you may have heard 6 months ago that Japan and South Korea concluded memorandum of understanding with DRC in relation to some critical minerals, trying to secure access to their companies. So what's the practical effect of this on existing concessions? Again, all these issues lead to disputes. And how do you prepare for a dispute? Well, it's straightforward. It's to ensure that you have access to a neutral forum that is based in a third-party country, whose local courts are known for being neutral and commercially minded, such as London, for example, England, or the US, or Singapore, or Geneva, or Paris, or these are well-known neutral forums, and that the applicable law is neutral as well, and whose principles are clear, and you can basically be fairly applied by the members of the tribunal. And usually these disputes are adjudicated by the application of public international law. That's why my partner Peter spent quite some time in the beginning explaining why public international law is relevant. And most of these treaties that are listed give you very concrete protection. It allows you to bring a claim before an arbitral tribunal in a very specific number of cases. If your company has been the target of adverse measures by the state, which effectively lead to discriminate you compared to other mining companies, or if the state fails to protect you physically, protect your asset physically against civil unrest or illegal mining or rebels, or if the state prevents you from repatriating hard currency abroad to your home state or anywhere, or if the state fails to treat you with due process. I'll give you a very practical example. You need an environmental permit. If the state takes 7 years to grant it to you, there is a problem. So that's not fair and equitable treatment, for example. So all these issues allow you, if they're breached, to bring a claim against the state seeking compensation. So that's why this is all very relevant. And to conclude, this really what we've seen over the last 5 years on a regular basis. I hope you found it interesting. Thank you very much.
thank you all for that. We've overrun, I'm afraid, so we will leave you to what may be more interesting presentations for the rest of the day. But please just bear in mind the message really is a simple one. International law de-risks cross-border mining projects. It doesn't de-risk them completely. You're never going to achieve that. But it will help to a very, very large extent and will make your mining projects more insurable and more financeable, or at least, hopefully, less expensively so. Thank you all very much indeed.